Hey y'all, this is Brown at IF Brown, and today we are going to be talking about Razorback on Blu-ray. So Razorback was made in 1984 and it was directed by Russel Mulcahy. So at this point in his career, Mulcahy was very well known for doing several groundbreaking music videos for artists such as Duran Duran, Elton John, and Rod Stewart. But with his entry into, say, big screen filmmaking with Razorback, he would take the sort of MTV style of filmmaking that he incorporated into his music videos, and he would bring that to, say, his filmmaking when it came to, say, full-on feature-length films. And with Razorback, as well as his very next film, and arguably his best-known one, Highlander, that style of filmmaking was very apparent, whether it came from, say, scene transitions or lighting and what have you. It oftentimes felt like you were watching a music video, at least in a sense of how atmospheric, the movies would be. And with Razorback, I mean, you have that style of filmmaking applied to an already alien setting, which is Australia. And so what you have as a result is a very unique horror film, especially within the realm of environmental horror. But this was something that I had been wanting to see for a bit now because, I mean, Highlander, it's one of my, favorite, 80s fantasy movies. And I had heard a lot of good things about Razorback as far as, say, how unique it was, and how, that's basically where Russel Mulcahy got his start in terms of, feature-length films. And I've seen some of his work, and, some of his work's better than others, but every now and then, you have something that's, pretty cool. Like you have, Highlander or The Shadow or Give 'Em Hell Alone. I mean, I liked all three of those movies, and so it was really cool to see where Mulcahy got his start, and the fact that just because it was his first film, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a dud. I mean, it's actually a pretty cool movie. But the story kicks off where this news reporter, a woman by the name of Beth Winters, is wanting to do a story on wildlife poaching in Australia, specifically the kangaroo poaching that seems to be a sort of epidemic over there. And so she says goodbye to her husband Carl and heads on over with a cameraman in Australia to do the story there. And so, unfortunately, considering that she's a foreign journalist, sort of trying to stir up the dirt on what to a lot of the people in Australia is kind of just a common way of life. So basically hunting kangaroo and using the meat for kangaroo for, say, dog food. I mean, that's basically business as usual for them. But for someone like Beth Winters and the news station that she works for, I mean, this is environmental abuse. And so while she's able to get some film footage and what have you from interviewing several people, she also draws the attention of two factory workers. Let's see, sorry, the Baker brothers, who along with being rather used to, say, the gruesome work of slaughtering kangaroos, they also tend to be somewhat homicidal in nature, and they decide to go after Beth. And one particular night, they're able to hunt her down out in the wilderness, and basically they nearly rape her. But then they're driven off by this warthog, which has been roaming the area and causing all sorts of havoc. And Beth unfortunately falls victim to this warthog, and her death is ruled as essentially accidental because the authorities are able to find her car, which had been crashed, which had been caused by the Baker brothers. But of course, they're denying that they know anything, and they don't want to just come out and admit that they had tried to rape her and they've been driven off by a wild warthog. And so the authorities are basically assuming that Beth, after having been in the wreck, had say stumbled off trying to look for help, and had accidentally fallen down a mine shaft or something. And so back stateside, Beth's now widowed husband Carl, he gets the news, and he's trying to put everything together and figure out what happened. And so he's going through the film footage that had been sent to the station that Beth and her cameraman had shot, and he sort of puts together this loose plan of tracking down the last couple of people that may have had contact with her. And the very last person that she was able to talk to was a gentleman by the name of, give me a sec, Jake Cullen, who was an elderly citizen of this town that they were doing the story in. And unfortunately, he has a bit of a negative reputation in town because everyone thinks that he murdered his grandson, despite the fact, he's, saying that, this was 2 years ago, but a wild, hog had basically torn apart his home and dragged his infant grandson off into the wilderness and had fed upon his kid, killing it. And so they couldn't find any evidence either way, and so he was basically set free due to lack of evidence. So while everyone's thinking that he's killed his grandson, Jake's basically become consumed by vengeance, trying to find this hog and track it down and kill it, because he knows what he saw, he knows it exists, and it's not any ordinary hog, and he's actually managed to kill several hogs in between the time that he lost his son or he lost his grandson, and the time in which he decided to go ahead and take up his vengeful mission. And so Carl makes contact with him, and once he tells him who he is, and that he thinks that Jake was the last person to see his wife alive, Jake he basically directs Carl to the Baker brothers because he had actually found evidence that they may have been in contact with Carl's wife at some point as well, because he was at the scene of where the authorities had found Beth's car, and he found some equipment that belonged to the Baker brothers. And so, now granted, Jake doesn't know that the Baker brothers had tried to rape Beth, but he just knows that hey, that she may have been she may have come across them as well. And so Carl ends up going to the Baker brothers ramshackle home, which is sort of in a cave almost, and he goes in with a cover story that he's a tourist from Canada, and he was told that they could take him kangaroo hunting. And so while he's pretending to be his tourist, he's trying to find out, hey, you guys know anything about what happened to that American journalist and what have you. And so unfortunately they get suspicious of him, because obviously they know who she is, and they're the ones who had tried to rape her, but they're not going to tell Carl that. And at this point they don't know that he's her widowed husband. But anyway, so you got this going on, and Carl ends up getting separated from the guys. Actually, they end up kicking him out of their vehicle, because they have a, how shall I say, a falling out. But while they end up doing their thing, and Carl's sort of left to fend for himself in the hostile environment of Australia. I mean, he basically wanders across this alien landscape and dehydrated and suffering from heat exhaustion. He ends up collapsing at the home of this farmer, a girl by the name of Sarah, who it turns out is also a friend of Jake, and so she knows what's going on with him and how his quest for vengeance has basically consumed him. But she also is trying to help out, and she's also trying to do some studies on the hog population, because apparently there's something going on that's sort of making them act unusual. And so these ideas that Jake has, that there's this one massive hog that's basically scaring animals away from their ordinary territory. I mean, this is something that she uses her environmental knowledge to sort of study. But so all three of these characters, Sarah, Carl, and Jake, they all have a reason to work together now, because I mean there's definitely evidence that this wild giant hog that Jake claims to have saw does exist. And so it's and that's basically the gist of the story of the movie. But one of the things that I really like about it is how it sort of manages to be several things several things all at once. And I mean, you have this sort of Captain Ahab style story of vengeance with the character of Jake, and then you of course have Carl trying to find out what happened to his wife, and then you have just this sort of environmental type of horror, in the sense that you get the idea, I mean, from the dialogue that's dropped, and also just from what you see on screen, you kind of get the idea that this company that's using kangaroo meat for, say, dog food or just pet food in general, you get the idea that when certain parties are hunting down kangaroos and encroaching, say, on the territory of wild animals who also see kangaroo as prey, in this case hogs, you get the idea that this very encroachment may very well be what drove this one razorback warthog to start preying on humans. And so it's basically all but stated that that's what's going on. And so in some very strange way, I mean, once you kind of are able to put two and two together, it is possible to feel a shred of sympathy for the razorback, in the sense that it's just an animal who's trying to survive, and unfortunately has been driven to pursue, say, people on two legs, or livestock on two legs, as opposed to, say, ordinary animals they would prey on. But on the other hand, you have these two kangaroo poachers, the Baker brothers, who are just straight up sadistic and psychotic. And so it's like, who's worse? This out of control warthog, which I mean is very much dangerous and needs to be put down, or these two poachers who are going out of their way to be sadistic and are willing to rape and kill someone. I mean, so you have like more than one source of horror, and you also have I guess you could say Australia itself being a source of horror, in the sense of how alien it is. And so yeah, it's one of those movies that just it's not just one thing. Like, there's a bunch of stuff going on. And all things considered, I mean, I thought that the acting was very well done. I thought that let's see, Gregory Harrison, who some viewers might remember him from a show called Trapper John MD. He does a very good job as playing, Carl. And one of the things I like about his character is that while his character is, say, an American, he's not, say, and he does become the protagonist at some point during the film. And that's another thing. It's like, you start off with, the character of Jake, being a protagonist with his, Captain Ahab, vengeance quest, and then it goes to Carl, and it sort of kind of goes back and forth between Jake and Carl, and who's the protagonist and so on and so forth. But some movies wherein you have an American character, being brought to a foreign environment, I mean, some movies, unfortunately fall, victim to, say, making the American, be the end-all, be-all solution to the problem, and he has no, obstacles whatsoever. And basically, because the character's an American, they automatically overcome everything. But one of the things that I like about this movie is that, yes, his character is American, but he is out of his element in Australia. And I like that, the movie went out of its way to show that this character was already struggling, psychologically with the death of his wife, and then you have him being totally out of his element in Australia, and being very much in danger when he comes across the Baker brothers. And then, of course, the environment wears and tears on him, not to mention when he goes up against the Razorback in the climax. I mean, the guy's put through a ringer. And, I like that even though he eventually becomes the main protagonist of the movie, I mean, he doesn't, walk away from things scot-free. I mean, this is something that really takes a toll on him, both, psychologically and physically. And also, a little bit behind the scenes trivia, Gregory Harrison did a lot of his own stunts in the movie. And at one point, he even dislocated his shoulder, and he had to finish the rest of the film on an insane amount of painkillers. And so, I mean, a lot of the action that you see with his character is actually the actor going through a lot of this stuff. So I thought that was actually rather impressive. I think that in terms of, I guess you could say, a character who resonated with me in terms of, say, their motivation and what have you, the character of Jake is played by Bill Kerr, who, amongst other things, was in the Mel Gibson movie Gallipoli. Bill Kerr did a really good job with the character of Jake, and I liked how at the beginning you see him as this kind grandfatherly figure, and then once his grandson's taken, which by the way is a very shocking opening. They literally open up the film with the Razorback destroying Jake's house and running off with his kid, and so it's like no one's safe in this movie. But anyway, though, I liked how you see Jake go from kind grandfather to, vengeful old man. And, you see how, basically it's taken a hold of his life. I mean, he's got like a trophy room, a really dark trophy room that's filled with, the heads of Razorbacks that he's killed over the time that he's been hunting them. And then, let's see, what else was there? But just, yeah, it was a really versatile performance, I thought. And so it's like you see these moments of humanity that he still has in him, but ultimately he's just consumed by this, quest for vengeance that he has. And as for the character of Sarah, let's see, the actress named Arkie Whiteley played her. And she was in the Mel Gibson movie, The Road Warrior, and that's probably what she's best known for, as well as this movie. But I thought that she was pretty good in the movie. I thought that she was kind of a sympathetic counterpoint to the character of Jake, in a sense that she was trying to in trying to help him, with, hunting hogs, she tried to sort of, keep his humanity intact. In the dialogue that they had together, you kind of got that feeling. And also when she, bonds with, Carl, I mean, their, chemistry is actually pretty good. And, in some respects, you could tell that there may be some romantic attraction, but at the same time, Carl, he's not wanting to disrespect the memory of his, dead wife. And so, but at the same time, you could tell that, he is starting to like Sarah. And so I thought that, while this could have been, say, a romantic plot tumor in another movie, I mean, I thought that this, friendship / relationship was, reasonably well handled. I mean, considering the type of movie it was. And, I liked how, she tried to, through her character, the filmmakers, were kind of, trying to emphasize the environmental aspect of the movie, because, she was talking about how, she was one of the characters that, along with, say, the character of Beth, the reporter, she was trying to emphasize that, basically, this Razorback, could very well be reacting to what man is doing to the environment, at least in Australia. And so they actually did a pretty good job with her character. But I think that, let's see, the scene stealers were probably, the characters of the Baker brothers, as played by Chris Haywood and David Argue. And these two guys, I mean, they were very fascinating because, I mean, in a lot of ways, they looked like sort of a combination of something you'd find in a, tacky new wave band from the 80s, as well as, say, something that, henchmen from the Road Warrior, would look like. And so, but it's like, because of, where the story's set and where these two particular characters work, this sort of, off the road a warehouse where they slaughter animals, I mean, it's kind of like they're in their own world and they don't have to conform to the rules of society. At least, that's how they feel. And so Australia at this point in time was already kind of a lawless place, it felt like. And so these two characters, who, it's like they got off on the grisliness of their job, but also, when, say, they had the opportunity to get away with it, they have no problem with raping and trying to kill someone. And, just based on their behavior, you kind of, wouldn't be surprised if, these characters within the story had done stuff like this, prior to, their attempt on, Beth. And so these two, I mean, they definitely brought a lot of the type of homegrown psychopathy that you'd find in, say, something like Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And also, the set design in terms of like where they worked, the slaughterhouse, as well as where they lived, this sort of, cave, this headquarter, this camp that's literally in a cave. I mean, it's very, fascinating to look at, it's because they've got like all this makeshift, animal art sort of, put together, like of animals that they've killed and everything. So visually speaking, I mean, very fascinating characters, but also just in terms of, the homegrown craziness, they were very good at, sort of bringing that element to the movie. And of course, the character of Beth, I felt like her character, as played by Judy Morris, I understand that her character was important to the story, but it's her death that kind of kicks things off, though. At least that's what gets the character of Carl involved and what have you. So I felt like in some respects, there was a lot of padding with her character, but at the same time, when, say, she meets her demise, or when she meets up with the Baker brothers, I mean, it's a very well shot, scene, and it's very terrifying. And so, even though it seems like a lot of the scenes with her were just kind of padding, there's, enough of, I guess you could say, a human level of horror, that she expresses, with what's happening with her character, when she has, her harsh interactions with the Baker brothers, to where it's like when she ultimately ends up getting, getting devoured by the, Razorback, you feel some level of sympathy for her, or pity, I guess. And so yeah, it's just some padding with her character, but at the same time, we did kind of, at least in my experience, I kind of felt something, for her, in the sense that, she did not go out in a good way, that kind of thing. But so all in all, yeah, I mean, you have, some good characters in, a rather unique setting. And, one of the things that I thought was pretty cool was that they'd had some night shots wherein there were two moons on screen. And, and I remember in the commentary track, they were talking about, some people were like, well, hey, how are there two moons when there's just one? And one of the things they just went with was that, Australia was basically just so alien that, the landscape itself was its own thing. And, and you kind of just went with it. And as a result, you get these fantastic visual shots of the environment that just look like something out of a, twisted but beautiful dream. And, and one of the other moments I remember from the movie is when the character of Carl, when he's dehydrated and suffering from heat exhaustion, he has this really strange nightmare where he's just wandering through this alien landscape, and you basically see like the ground opening up around him, and these and this dead horse just bursting up out of the ground at him, and sort of charging at him, and he's trying to run on bloody feet, while just this landscape just keeps going on and on, and this dead horse like literally just keeps coming at him. And it's a very striking scene, and so it's like, it just considering that the character's having a nightmare, I mean, the scene does not feel out of place. But you look at the landscape and everything, you look at the landscape of Australia, then you look at the landscape in the nightmare, and it's like, okay, I mean, is he dreaming at this point, or is this something real, that kind of thing. And even if it's a dream, it doesn't feel like a dream, if that makes sense. Like it feels like a dream that is also real. And so I thought that was actually really cool too. So just basically they were able to tap into the alien feeling of a place like Australia and bring it to the screen. And so another thing about the movie that was really cool is the music score by, let's see, what was it? Sorry, give me a sec. There's a lot of names here. Iva Davis, or yeah, let's see, write down Iva Davies. Okay, there you go. Sorry about that. So Iva Davies was in a group called Ice House, which there were several Australian musicians that Russel Mulcahy had actually worked with. But Iva Davies came in and did the soundtrack, and it's a very good score, very atmospheric, at times spooky, depending on what's going on. But and you also have some very good cinematography by Dean Semler, who also worked on the aforementioned The Road Warrior. And so Russel Mulcahy had a good group of people to work with. I mean, you had good camera work, you had good music, and then you had of course you had just a wonderful atmosphere, and some unique characters kind of thrown in. But I guess something that that kind of stood out, though, or at least to me, it was when it came to, say, the Razorback itself. When the Razorback's on screen, like let me rephrase that, when the Razorback's going after someone, it's pretty spooky. And of course, this being, the early 80s, they didn't have, all this technology to be able to, do CGI or anything like that. And so they kind of had to take a play from Steven Spielberg and show, the monster as little as possible. But when the monster is on screen, it looks good. And apparently one of the people that was responsible for the mechanical effects for the Razorback went on to work on the Matrix. So there you go. But anyway, though, the Razorback itself is a pretty spooky creature, especially in the climax of the movie. Because prior to that, you catch glimpses of it, and they're very spooky glimpses, and you see a lot of the damage that it does, like whether it be pulling someone out of a car or destroying a whole house. I mean, this thing is very dangerous. But and like I said, the climax of the movie, when you see it, the most of it, it's pretty spooky and very dangerous. And so, while I did think they did a good job with the Razorback, I was kind of hoping that we'd get some kind of explanation as to why this Razorback was as deadly as it was, or as harsh as it was, because warthogs are ferocious animals in general, but it's like there's lines of dialogue that imply that there's something off about this Razorback, that there's something different. And so, and they even talked about it in the commentary track, like, was this a Razorback that was just pure evil, or was this a Razorback that had been pushed off its own territory and was hunting down humans out of necessity? And so there's a little bit of that there's some support for, I guess you could say, both sides, in the sense that there's a lot of attention given to, say, man's impact on the environment, for sure, but at the same time you have like this straight up alien atmosphere that very well could be supernatural, without anyone coming out and saying it. And this Razorback almost seems to be like nature's pissed off answer to what man's been doing to the landscape and to its to the animal population. And so but on the other hand, though, there are lines of dialogue that basically imply that this particular Razorback is scaring off a lot of the wildlife in the area, and hence where you get this idea that maybe there's something supernatural about it. And I kind of wish that they had actually gone to further detail, like trying to say, okay, it's not supernatural, but it is straight up dangerous and it needs to be put down. And this movie was actually based on a book by someone named Peter Brennan. And I've never read the book, but one of the things I read about the book was that along with, say, this diamond smuggling subplot that was a rather prominent part of the book, not being in the movie, one of the things that's in the book is that somewhere along the way, it goes into detail about how this Razorback's basically being driven insane by parasitic organisms, and also from all these wounds that it has, from being shot at, the wounds are festering and just driving it insane. And so you kind of, like, from what I understand in the book, you actually feel sorry for the Razorback to some extent, even though knowing that this is a threat needs to be put down. But whereas in the movie, though, you could still find a shred of sympathy for the Razorback. When you see, just how bad the abuse of the environment is, pushing this Razorback to, hunt outside of its comfort zone. But at the same time, I just wish that there'd been like an explanation as to why it was doing what it was doing. Let's see. The other thing was that, and this isn't me trying to be, insensitive or anything. It's just that I think that there were times where, because, say, I'm not Australian, there were lines of dialogue that I didn't understand, just because of how it sounded, or there were some cultural aspects in the movie that I didn't understand myself. And so while there was like a lot of commonplace stuff when it came to, say, like if someone's Australian, I mean, they're going to get it, no big deal. I mean, I was kind of at a loss as to what was going on. I had to sort of backtrack or look things up, that kind of thing. And I guess in a way that kind of helped with the movie in a way, because, I mean, kind of like the character of Carl, who was out of his depth. I mean, there were moments where I felt like I was out of my depth with the movie. But, I mean, once I figured out what was going on, I was like, okay, it's not that big of a deal. It's just, at the same time, there is kind of a cultural clash, sort of feeling with the movie. But yeah, this was just a very unique movie. I mean, it's, on paper, it's, shouldn't be anything special. I mean, it's a, warthog out of control, Jaws in Australia. But, I mean, they do a better job with it and actually make it into a good movie. And so, and it looks good, it sounds good, and just, having it set in Australia, I think, did wonders for it. But I'm going to go ahead and give Razorback 4 out of 5 stars. This was a cool movie. And so the Blu-ray has, quite a few special features. You've got an audio commentary with director Russel Mulcahy and Shane Armstrong, who's kind of a self-proclaimed aficionado of the Razorback movie, amongst other things. But it's a pretty good commentary track. I actually listened to it, and you learn a lot about, the process of making the movie, some of the stuff they want to do versus some of the stuff that they, couldn't do. And also you end up getting some really good and oftentimes funny stories about Mulcahy's music video days. Like, he's got some, funny Elton John and Rod Stewart stories, and he's even got a good Duran Duran story too. So if you like commentary tracks, this one's actually a pretty good one. And there's also the VHS version, and it's the original uncut it's the original uncut Australian home video release, which I haven't actually watched it yet, but apparently it has like some deleted scenes, like as far as some of the blood and gore and what have you. And you also have an audio interview with actor Gregory Harrison, which is actually a pretty good interview. And the conversation flows at a good pace, and so if you're working in the kitchen or something, I mean, that's a pretty good thing to listen to. You have Jaws on Trotters, which is basically a making of featurette of the movie, and you have like interviews with Mulcahy, producer Hal McElroy, and you have one of the guys who created the Razorback, Bob McCarran, and of course composer Iva Davies. And then you have actors Judy Morris and Chris Haywood. And you also have, let's see, A Certain Piggish Nature, looking back at Razorback with film historians Lee Gambin, Alexandra Heller-Nicholas, Sally Christie, and Emma Westwood. And then you have deleted scenes with optional audio commentary and some theatrical trailers and still galleries. For the deleted scenes, basically there were some scenes of violence and gore that were cut, but to be honest, I mean, they really weren't that gory to me. They were pretty tame. There may have been an extra blood spurt here and there. The one scene that I thought was pretty cool, that it would have been awesome if they kept in the movie, was where one character ends up getting their skull chopped in half, like from right here. And so unfortunately the film stock was kind of degraded, but you saw enough to where you're like, ooh, damn, that kind of thing. But so yeah, overall though, I mean, it's a good movie with some good bonus features. If you're into supplemental material, this is definitely a good way to check out the movie. So yeah, Razorback, 4 out of 5 stars. It was a good movie. So you got any questions, comments, please drop a line, let me know. And you like what you see here, please feel free to like and subscribe. So y'all take care. Bye.